Hi.
Hi there.
My name is Ryan Johnson. I will be the interpreter working with you over this next semester.
Great.
You're Mr. Rogers, correct?
I am, yeah.
Lovely to meet you. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I just wanted to start off by kind of getting to know about your teaching experience. So you've been, you teach social studies, right?
Yeah.
And primarily AP.
Correct. Yeah.
Oh, okay. And so have you ever worked with a deaf student before?
I've not. No.
Okay, yeah, that's pretty common for mainstream teachers. So I just wanted to, sit down and talk to you about kind of what this semester is going to look like then.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the deaf student we will be working with, Danny Larson, I believe you have that name as well. So the student is deaf, but he tends to speak for himself. That is something that just to note, so you're kind of not caught off guard at the first day. But I have not actually worked with a student myself, but I have been in this district for about 3 years now, and so I have experience in the district, but not with this student in particular.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, so this will be kind of new for the both of us. So I just wanted to kind of tell you the basics about working with an interpreter in a classroom setting. I know it can be a little bit different to have another person in the room with you that's not a teacher's assistant or something like that.
Right.
So first off, I just kind of wanted to open up with the concept that having an interpreter in the classroom does not actually mean complete access for that deaf student.
Okay.
That's a pretty common misconception. But when you think about all of the happenings that do go on with the classroom and the fact that this student is having their education interpreted rather than direct access, kind of like those hearing students who you're directly talking to, that is a different experience for that student in this classroom. And so that's something kind of important to keep in mind.
Sure.
Yeah, as we go through this semester. So I did want to kind of touch base on our roles as professionals in this classroom collaborating throughout this class, and kind of how those look. So of course you're the teacher, you'll be doing the instructing and all of the teaching involved, but just kind of defining the fact that we are both professionals working with the student, kind of clearly in different ways, but
Right.
keeping those lines open for communication between the two of us as professionals, kind of focusing on different aspects of the student's education, but understanding that, for example, I can't leave the classroom to make copies or help you out with anything like that, because I am here to facilitate that language access
Of course,
for the
right.
student. Right. And one other thing is the importance of prep work. So I'm assuming you do prep for your classes probably a little bit in advance, somewhat in advance.
Yep, I do.
Yeah, so when you have the opportunity, sharing those prep materials and kind of the lesson plan for that day and such with me as soon as you can would actually be really helpful. That gives me the time to look over and do my own prep work in order to make those lessons go as smoothly as possible for that student.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah, and that includes any videos that you're using. Sometimes they'll have captions on them, sometimes not. So depending as well if it's like a VHS, DVD, something online, those can kind of change if it has captions or not. And so just making sure to share those with me as well would be really helpful.
Absolutely, yeah.
Great. And then I just want to touch a little bit on working with a deaf student and having a deaf-friendly classroom. Kind of in general. And so I've heard that you like a lot of group discussions and group projects.
Yeah, absolutely, as much as I can.
Okay, great. So just to talk about those a little bit. So it's good to know kind of in advance that that's something to expect throughout the semester. Very good to know. And again, that is something that prep is really important with, because with group discussions like that, with the interpretation, there's a lot of voices going back and forth, and it's a pretty quick dialogue when students get talking to
Sure,
each other.
right.
I'm sure you know. And so being able to have that prep material is really important for those. And also having some time in class for those group projects. Is that something that typically happens, or it kind of depends?
Yeah, always giving them time to work on it in class as a group.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's great, because it's one of those things, if there is time outside of class that needs to be spent on group projects, it can be a little bit more challenging to get the interpreter there. Yeah, so great to know, and I'm sure we will approach that throughout the semester and change accordingly.
Yeah.
Another point is the aspects of having visual stimuli in your classroom. As a social studies teacher, I know your classroom isn't entirely set up yet, but I'm sure there's a variety of maps and other kind of reference materials throughout the classroom.
Yeah, there.
Yeah, and other videos and such that you might reference throughout class, kids looking at the book, stuff like that.
Mhm.
So something important to keep in mind when using those visual supports, which are great for any student in general, and very great for deaf students, is the fact that Danny will have to take the time to look at that stimuli and then look at the interpreter, or vice versa, in order to get all of the information needed. And so perhaps if you can kind of keep that in the back of your mind and start thinking about that now,
Sure.
that's another kind of added thing to think about, knowing that one student will kind of have a bit of lag time kind of throughout that process.
Sure, of
And I'm
course.
sure the extra time will help all the students in general to be able to look over those sorts of things. Another point on those supports, do you use the board a lot, writing the board as you're speaking, stuff like that?
Yeah, most class periods I will.
Okay, good to know. Yeah, and that is another great reference, because that's the thing. A lot of times, having those notes written will also help the deaf student in the classroom to have another form to kind of get that information through. So yeah, I do encourage you to use that as much as it seems like you do. So
Yeah, absolutely.
very great, very great. So one other thing I just want to touch on. Working with deaf students can be a bit of a challenge. Not really a challenge, but there's a little bit of anxiety sometimes for teachers at first. And I just want to highlight the importance of Danny as a normal student. You know, he's in an AP class, and just treating him like any other student and having those high expectations that you do for every student in your classroom. That's something that's really important to make sure that, that student is supported and set up for success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. Did you have any other questions to ask me?
Not at the moment, but I'll reach out to you if I do.
Okay, perfect. And I did actually, I have some reference materials for you, a little bit more in-depth discussion, not really discussion, but brief articles, stuff like that you can look over if you have time through this prep week before school starts next week.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, great. I will shoot those to you on your school email, and be sure to contact me if you have any other questions.
Awesome, will do.
Okay, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Have a lovely afternoon.
You too.